Okay.
Fingers are crossed, it holds.
Right? Success. Third time's a charm. Well,
Cool.
cool. Thanks for joining. So yeah, let's just dive in. You want to give us a little bit of like your backstory? Were sports like a big part of your youth and upbringing, or tell us a little bit about that?
Yes and no. I mean, I played soccer like at a local level, but pretty competitively growing up. So, like I played high school soccer and I grew up around the Annapolis and DC area. So it's a pretty big sport there. And I took it quite seriously, but I didn't actually play sports in college. So
Okay.
like I didn't go on to play at a collegiate level anywhere. But since I had played soccer, I knew what it was to be an athlete. And so I had continued kind of running on my own there. And I went to the Naval Academy for 2 years of my undergrad. So you have to play like a club level sport or something there too. So I certainly maintained like my athlete status, I guess, through college, just wasn't really competitive at anything necessarily. And then in college, while I was running, I left the Naval Academy and actually went to the University of Virginia, where I found trail running and ultra running and a really great community there. And so that was that was around 2006. And that was when I really started trail running and just like learning that whole side of things. And then when I graduated from college, moved up to Baltimore City, I transitioned a little bit more into the triathlon world and began Ironman and stuff then. And I saw a career for myself with that. So in 2014, I became a professional triathlete, and that's kind of been my path ever since. So I really love trail running. So I've been able to work in a lot of adventures on the side through my triathlon career.
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like running was kind of always your base that was there,
Yeah, for sure. My dad had me running 5Ks and 10Ks and stuff with him, not super competitively, but just growing up, I remember, doing like 12 and under age group at a local 10K and stuff like that. So I never really knew what I was doing, but it was kind of good because I never got burnt out on it, which I think is a common theme with some people who were competing like at high levels as they were growing up. So I'm thankful for that aspect, that it showed me it was there, but it didn't burn me out of it.
Right. That's awesome. And you were being based out of Virginia. You're central to some pretty awesome trails and stuff, and that probably really gave you that love for the trail running as well.
Yeah, so Charlottesville is where I'm based now and is where I finished my undergrad. And so we're just about, a few miles from the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I don't think I quite knew how lucky and spoiled I was to have that kind of access to trails, not only in town in Charlottesville, but also just a stone's throw away. So I was lucky that from college age, I was getting comfortable just being out on trails, with groups by myself, that sort of thing. And learning how to read maps and learning how to, figure out the gear side of things and the nutrition side of things. There was already a community in a mountain town that knew a lot of that and was willing to share some of those tips. So I was able to learn that kind of from the start of my running career.
That's interesting. Yeah. So that probably really helped you, especially on the nutrition side of things, transfer into triathlete stuff, because nutrition's a huge part of that.
For sure. Yeah. In my first 100-mile races, I was eating pizza slices and things like that. And I swear that was training my stomach for Ironman, because I can, knock on wood, I don't have major GI issues a lot of times racing. And if it's a calorie, it's a calorie, and I can get it down usually, which is really helpful for endurance sports.
That's awesome. You're lucky. I am not that fortunate. I try to keep mine very clean. But going back to trail and kind of I feel like from what I'm hearing you say is that growing up and then maybe the Naval Academy and different things like that really started to build that grit within you to go into ultra, to go into triathlon stuff. Speak about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's certainly a side of me that's always just been a competitor, whether it was soccer at the local level or whatever. I love to compete. I love that game day, race day type of feeling that you get, you know, and I've loved that ever since I was little. And then I started to realize, you know, fast forward a couple decades, I guess, as I was going through and I was discovering these like ultra endurance events, that I started to kind of see how things were shaking out as I was competing. And I saw that the shorter stuff, which required a lot more speed and power, you know, I was fine at. I certainly wouldn't say I was bad at that, but you know, I wasn't at the very top of the pointy end of the competition by any means. But I saw this like avenue where I was like, there are things that are longer, right? And that like less people really want to do because it's a little bit like harder a lot of times. So I was like, I think I can be good at that stuff where it's just, you know, a little bit longer. The speed comes down a little bit. The endurance factor goes up, and it relies on other things like your mental toughness and kind of your just will to survive like multiple days on end at times. And like you said with nutrition, you know, having that come pretty naturally to me to be able to fuel like that has really been something that's helped. So I think it was kind of intentional of like a shift in things where I was like, that's the side of sport that I want to be a part of and that I think I can really excel at.
That's awesome. That's really cool. And man, there's so many things that I want to ask you about in regards to that, but through all of that, kind of as you were coming up into the ultra world athlete career, was there a woman that like really inspired you or you looked to? Because I mean, I feel like, you can correct me, but I feel like when you were becoming a pro is when in the ultra world and my world is when women were really starting to become competitive and get a lot of high stuff, you know?
Yeah, it's funny to think back to that really early period where like 2006 to 2010, where I was not only often the youngest, being like in my early 20s, but being a woman on the start line of some of these 50 milers and things like that. I mean, there weren't a lot of us, you know, there still aren't a lot of us at some of these events. And then it was quite different. So I had probably two main mentors through like that early side of my career. In the ultra running scene, there's a woman, Francesca Conti. She owns Bad to the Bone Endurance Sports here in Charlottesville, and kind of just took me in. I did some like work at the running store they had, and she would take me running on the weekends. She taught me how to train for my first 100-miler, and she was someone who was really comfortable in the trail running space and comfortable being out there and showing me how to do it, you know, alone often, and being just comfortable on trails by myself. And then as I transitioned to triathlon, I was able to link up with Hillary Biscay, who is she's an Ultraman world champion. So Ultraman's like a 3-day Ironman, essentially. It's much harder than even Ironman. She's competed in 66 Ironmans through her career. So I knew she was like a woman after my own heart with like that endurance side. Like, let's find the really hard things and go after those. And so she's been working with me as a coach since 2010. And so that has really just worked out well. And using like, you know, between the two of us, the adventures we have had, a constant source of like inspiration and what's the next big thing we can find to do.
That's cool. That's really cool. You touched a bit on like being out there on the trail and by yourself. And earlier you were talking about having that mental to be out there for days on end. Like a lot of people know that you're a professional triathlete, but not as many people I don't think would know that you're an FKT holder on the Vermont Long Trail, right?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
So I have been doing Ironman professionally, right, since 2014. So I'm not getting, you know, I'm turning 35 in a month and a half. So I'm not like super old, but I am well aware of the fact that like my career as an athlete is going to, you know, not be continually going upwards, right? So over the last, I would say, you know, about 2 years ago, I was starting to reflect a little bit more on my career and really make sure that I had set things up to like be going after the biggest goals that I I wanted to while I was probably in my prime, right? And while I had time and resources to make some of that happen. And one of the things at the top of that list was not an Ironman. You know, I was kind of in this space where I was like, they're not really exciting me to be jumping out of bed to be training every day. So like, what is at the top of the list? And there's a documentary called Finding Traction that came out in 2014, I think, somewhere in between 2012, 2014. And it profiles ultra runner Nikki Kimball. And as she was taking on the long trail and setting kind of the mark for the women's fastest known time on that. And I had, ever since I had seen that movie on Netflix, I looked at that and the trails appealed to me. It was like classic East Coast trail environment. And just that challenge, right? Of being like, could I do that for 5 days straight? And could I, as someone who, I was nowhere near Nikki in any of the races we were in together, you know, could I challenge her record, given that my strength happens a lot of times, you know, when things get longer and things get harder. So at that point it was about 2017. And, you know, I said to Hillary, I said, I would like to go for the long trail, I think is like my next big project. And so, you know, she's like, by all means, if that's what's going to excite you to compete and to be out there, then let's do it. So it was about a year in the making from when I really put a decision to like go for it. And it involved, I actually moved up to Vermont for a summer to be able to train on the long trail ahead of time. So the summer of 2018, I spent 2 months up there getting ready for it. And then, at the end of July in 2018, I took my best friends, my family, and we went on an adventure for 273 miles that ultimately I got the record by about 5 hours. So that was pretty cool. And that was definitely I had done one other stage race prior to that. And this was like much different. That was supposed to be 3 days. It ended up only being 2, a lot of distance. So I kind of went into the long trail a bit blind, I guess, but it worked out, which I'm really grateful for.
That's awesome. That gets me so pumped. Like, I love the FKT stuff. Like, I feel like it's a pretty popular thing right now. And I feel like that's where a lot of things are going, you know?
Well, and especially given the times we're in now where you might not, you know, have super large organized events for a while. So, you know, the trail culture is a great place where I think we'll still be finding events in the, you know, shorter term rather than longer term. And so, yeah, same with FKTs. Like, you can still go out on a lot of trails, which is nice during this time.
Yeah, for sure. So on your FKT on the long trail, were you supported or self?
I was supported. So I had a pacer with me, and sometimes two, for safety reasons and carrying a lot of the fuel and the hydration and stuff. And we had a little crew that was traveling around. Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. That's really cool. Congratulations on that. And that probably also, you used a lot of your nutrition experience in that as well. Cause I mean, constant crying day on day is huge.
Yeah. And I actually, you know, I experimented a lot, and something like that really came down to efficiency, and just like keeping it very, very simple. Like, even though I had a crew, you know, I didn't want to keep giving them like these lists of things to be cooking every hour for me, right? So like, the more streamlined and efficient we could make every single process of that, it was just going to be better. And so, yeah, luckily we didn't have too many issues with my nutrition, but over 5 days, things get a little hairy in general, I think. So
like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And kind of a sideline question for you in the midst of this conversation is like, is there a quote that like rolls over your brain all the time during when the times get really tough like that, you know, when you're on day 3, or just like, why am I doing this?
You know, it's always just, especially in that event, you know, when I was on the long trail, I leaned a lot on my coach was out there, Hillary was out there, on my best friends that were out there, my boyfriend was out there. Like, I leaned a lot on them, and all of them kind of like, when things got hard, it was like, this is what you came for, Alyssa. Like, like, this is why you are here. you knew this was not going to be a cakewalk, right? And so embrace it and just keep moving forward. So I think that like this is what you came for. So, you know, grin and bear it is probably what it boils down to for me in those hard moments.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's always so good to have people there by your side that'll just be like tell
Like,
tell hard
well,
stuff.
I think you expect, yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned like you've done some stage racing before, but that's nothing compared to the FKT on the long trail. What was your transition into Trans-Pecos being you're a Trans-Pecos veteran now, and you know, how did you find out about Trans-Pecos Ultra? What was that line between like your long trail and the Trans-Pecos?
Yeah, so the time after Long Trail, I realized that, you know, I had never done something really like that much vertical and like that kind of thing. So I was like, I really liked that. And I was looking at other races I could do along those lines to tie that in with ultra running. And I came across, you know, UTMB like lined up. I knew of that obviously, but it just really aligned more like with what I realized was probably a strength of mine to be able to do that sort of terrain and climbing and things. So qualifying for UTMB and getting into the lottery is like quite a process. And so it just became a matter of looking to see what I could do to start to get the points to get into the UTMB lottery. And I was looking for like a lot of bang for my buck in terms of those points. And with TPU having 6 points, it's at a great time of year. Like I was still able to have a pretty full triathlon season before I kind of fitted over to the training for Trans-Pecos. And so that was really appealing to me. And then I had never, I guess I think I had been to Texas before, at least traveled through, but like I had never really been to Texas, right? So I was like, well, what better way to see Texas than to be running through the desert there for 6 days? So that was really appealing to me. And just that the whole aspect of like self-supported racing was so different than I had really ever done before. So I was like, I got to figure out what this is like. And
Yeah,
it was just very intriguing to me. So kind of all those factors combined, and TPU was like, all right, this is what I'll do.
that's awesome. No, I really like that. Yeah, and I think it's cool to see. I was able to be out there this year and be on the course with you, see like all of your skills from, you know, like triathlon and running and FKT and all of that together to mesh really well in something like a supported race.
Yeah, I think, you know, I've had a lot of questions before about like how to train for that and, you know, what is it like and things like that. And I found that being out there, there's certainly very specific things you can do that are like trainable, right? But it's hard. It's a challenge, you know, whether you're trying to go as fast as you can or you're just trying to kind of make it through within the time cutoffs each day, whatever your goal is. It's really hard to do that day after day. And so I think, you know, coming from a background where I had put myself in position that I had done hard things before, as simple as that sounds, right? Like the best thing you can do to train for that multi-day thing is to challenge yourself to do hard things a few days in a row. And it sounds so simple, but you know, if you start training with a heavy backpack on tomorrow, it's going to get pretty old by the time TPU comes around, right, in October. So I was just really happy that I was able to like mix up the endurance side of training, you know, and whether that was going for a long bike ride one day, followed up by a long hike the next day, followed up with, you know, putting on the heavy backpack and going for a run on the third day, having that like versatility where everything was just kind of a hard thing to do that day, worked out really well for me, I think, at TPU. And definitely given like just the versatility of things I had done in the past, I think it had set me up for that mindset of like, you just got to keep moving and accept that it's hard, but that's what you signed up for. So embrace it.
That's awesome. That's really good advice. What's like if someone was to ask you like they're going to do TPU for the first time, they've done stage racing, what's like one piece of advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I think that really, that nutrition piece, really dialing it in. You know, even like I said, my stomach was holding up okay. The hydration is definitely something you need to pay a lot of attention to. But even just getting yourself used to like the monotony of having to eat what you brought with you, right? Like that was something that was a challenge I didn't really expect. And I think a lot of people can go from good to not good to like really not good very quickly in an event like that if you're not on top of, you can be the fittest person in the world, and you know, if you don't hydrate and fuel, you're just not going to make it through. Like it's pretty simple when you're out in the desert in Texas. So number one is absolutely nailing that nutrition piece, however that is for you, and just figuring out how you'll get in the calories and the hydration you need day after day.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that you say that, especially about hydration, because people are like, oh, it's like, it's the desert, but it's late in the year. So it's like not that hot. And like, but you don't realize that you're like zero shade at all, like out there day after day, and just the wind and all of that suck the moisture right out of you. You got to stay on top of it. I love that.
Totally. Yeah.
That's great. So, what's on the horizon for you? Like I mean, you mentioned UTMB. That's like where your focus is.
Well, I was hoping to do some Ironmans. I was actually hoping to be back in Texas racing Ironman Texas this last weekend, which obviously didn't take place. So I think a lot of the professional athletes these days are kind of a bit of a holding pattern, and we just want to make sure we're staying fit and staying ready to compete when it can happen again. But I am, you know, lucky that having trail adventures and things like that has always been like up on my list. And so if nothing else, I'm thinking this year would be a good year to do something like that again, and to just take something on once things are a little bit more open in the world. But until then, I'm just, you know, enjoying some time outside and active and walking my dog a lot more.
Nice.
That kind of stuff. Yeah.
And you live, if I'm not mistaken, really close to the Appalachian Trail. Any tempting thoughts about FKTs on there?
No. People, I wish I could, like, wanted to do that. But 5 days was really, really hard. And that was like, I was done, like not another step after 5 days. So those people who are able to put those days like of mileage together for 40 to 50 days is absolutely insane to me. So I've been working on my navigation skills actually a little bit more, and I'm hoping that, you know, something I find will involve a little bit maybe of the bushwhacking and the navigating kind of thing to challenge me in that respect. It's been a fun way to test my brain, I guess, while I've been out on the trails too.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point as well, because like even though TPU is a marked course, you're in a solid color pattern in the desert, you know, and your brain kind of just starts to like erase things. And it isn't it a challenging course to follow out there?
You know, I didn't really have any issues, which was great and very much appreciated, you know. But I think with anything, you know, any kind of ultra, when you're out in kind of isolated space, you have to be aware and kind of be, you know, ready to have to navigate a little bit if you needed to, or to make decisions about if something's feeling a little off, like at which point did you go off, you know?
Yeah.
So I probably erred on the cautious side with markings and like my own speed to make sure I was always aware of being on track. I felt like at 165 miles or whatever we cover, like I wasn't really trying to have any bonus miles. And so I found the course out there very well marked, but I had like, I don't even know if I could have really used it at that point, but I had a compass in my pack, like in case I needed it at some point. But with the terrain, you know, it is different than what I see on the East Coast, where there's a lot of like high trees and stuff. It's a bit more open, so you can often kind of see, like, get oriented in that respect of like you're up high, you're headed that direction, okay, and keep your bearings that way. But yeah, with the heat and everything, you get a little loopy. So I was very, very happy with the job that the TPU team did with the markings and stuff, just to keep that part out of the equation for us.
That's awesome. Well, that's good to hear. And then just wrapping up here, like, I know you also have a podcast that highlights women in triathletes. And then if you want to talk a bit as well about where people can follow you on social media, podcast and things like that.
Yeah, so I am the co-host of the Iron Women podcast, and you can search that on the app that you get podcasts, Iron Women. It'll pop up, and every week, my co-host, Haley Chura, who is also a professional triathlete, she and I talk to another, usually professional triathlete. Sometimes it becomes just another woman who's a professional athlete in another realm that we wanted to talk to. So we leave that door open a little bit, but we get to hear their story and highlight them a little bit more with some media, which is awesome. And we have a lot of fun doing that. And Haley and I catch up each week with what we're doing. She just competed in the Marathon Olympic trials back in February or March. So that's, we've kind of always tracked each other through the podcast, I guess. And then I have a website, alyssagodesky.com. I'm on Instagram here is at Alyssa Godesky. And I blog and update Instagram. I'm probably doing a lot more of that these days because I have a little bit more time without heading to school a lot. So yeah, if you want to stay updated on that and all information on me and the coaching programs I do and things like that is all on my website.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Especially the podcast about just highlighting triathlete women and stuff and, giving them a shout out. I love that.
Yeah, it's like come a long ways, and as we've gotten better, we're like, well, now we need to keep it going because it's become so fun for us just to be able to check in, and triathlon's such a solo sport that now we have a lot of friends because we catch up with them on the week and then we know them, and seeing them at races has been really fun. So Haley and I really enjoy that,
and just continuing to build that community and share that with each other.
Yeah, endurance sports can be pretty solo a lot. So the more we can do to connect, which is awesome with technology, like we're sitting, in our living rooms and still being able to chat, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Well, cool. Thank you so much for your time, and look forward to seeing what you conquer the rest of this year or next year.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm excited to follow the profiles of people headed to TPU this year. It'll be a good one, I'm sure.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Bye.
Yeah.